Welcome to tonight's stories. These tales will be accompanied by the gentle sound of rain to help you drift off to sleep. Before you get too comfortable, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. I'd love to know where in the world you're watching from and what time it is there. Leave a comment below. It's fascinating to see how our community spans different time zones, all united in seeking a peaceful night's rest. Now make yourself comfortable, adjust your volume, and let the rain and story guide you into peaceful dreams. Our story begins.
The power outage in my apartment couldn't have come at a worse time. As a remote software developer with 3 major project deadlines looming, I needed a reliable workspace immediately. After 2 days of trying to work from local coffee shops with spotty Wi-Fi, I finally admitted defeat and started searching for temporary accommodations. Living in Manchester, New Hampshire meant limited options for short-term rentals. Most available Airbnbs were either exorbitantly priced or too far from the city. After an hour of scrolling through listings, I found something that seemed workable, a small cottage on the outskirts of town, in what locals called the Old Mill District. The price was surprisingly reasonable, though the reviews were sparse. The most recent one was from 6 months ago, but it was positive, praising the quiet location and reliable internet connection. I booked it for 5 days, hoping my apartment's electrical issues would be resolved by then. The host, listed only as JM, sent automated check-in instructions within minutes. Something about the impersonal nature of the message made me slightly uneasy, but I dismissed it as simple efficiency. The drive to the cottage took longer than expected. The GPS led me through increasingly narrow roads, past abandoned textile mills and overgrown lots. By the time I arrived, darkness had settled over the neighborhood like a heavy blanket. The streetlights were few and far between, casting weak pools of yellow light that seemed to emphasize the shadows rather than dispel them. The cottage itself was set back from the road, partially hidden behind old oak trees. It was smaller than it had appeared in the photos, with weathered gray siding and dark windows that reflected nothing but the dim streetlight. I parked my car in the gravel driveway, grabbed my laptop bag and overnight case, and made my way to the front door. The key was where the instructions said it would be, tucked behind a loose brick in the garden wall. The front door creaked open into a musty darkness that smelled of old wood and something else I couldn't quite identify. Something metallic, almost like copper. I fumbled for the light switch, and ancient-looking wall sconces flickered to life, revealing a space that looked frozen in time. The furniture was all heavy wood and faded upholstery, probably dating back to the 1970s. The walls were covered in striped wallpaper that had started to peel at the corners. But most importantly, there was a solid desk by the window, and the Wi-Fi password was clearly displayed on a laminated card. Exhaustion hit me suddenly, and I decided to leave the full exploration for morning. I took my bags upstairs, found the bedroom with its surprisingly modern queen-sized bed, and collapsed into it fully clothed. My last thought before drifting off was that the house seemed to creak and settle around me like a living thing. Morning brought weak sunlight filtering through dusty windows and the realization that I'd slept through my first alarm. I rushed through a quick shower in the bathroom that had definitely seen better days, set up my workstation at the desk downstairs, and logged into my first meeting just in time. The internet connection was indeed stable, and I slowly began to relax into my temporary workspace. The cottage might be old and slightly creepy, but it was serving its purpose. I was deep in code review when the first knock came. It wasn't a regular knock, not the sharp, professional rap of a delivery person or the confident knock of a neighbor. This was different. 3 slow, deliberate taps followed by silence. I waited, hoping whoever it was would go away. The knock came again, same pattern, same deliberate pace. I moved quietly to the window, careful to stay behind the curtain as I peered out. A man stood on the porch, his back partially turned to me. He was tall and lean, wearing a black hoodie despite the warm weather. What caught my attention immediately were the tattoos that covered his neck and crept up behind his ear, intricate designs that looked like tangled thorns or barbed wire. Something about his posture made me uncomfortable. He wasn't shifting his weight or checking his phone like someone making a casual visit. He stood perfectly still, as if listening intently. I remained frozen behind the curtain, barely breathing. until he finally turned and walked away. His gait was smooth and controlled, almost predatory. I returned to my desk, but couldn't focus on work. I messaged the Airbnb host about the unexpected visitor, but received no response. After an hour without any further disruptions, I managed to immerse myself back in my work, chalking up the incident to someone having the wrong address. The day passed in a blur of coding and virtual meetings. I ordered delivery for lunch, giving specific instructions to leave the food on the porch, and retrieved it only after watching the delivery driver leave. By late afternoon, I had almost forgotten about the morning's visitor. As dusk approached, the shadows in the cottage grew longer and deeper. I should have turned on more lights, but I was in the zone, trying to fix a particularly stubborn bug in my code. The soft tap of my keyboard and the gentle hum of my laptop fan were the only sounds in the house. That's why the second knock was so startling. The same 3 deliberate taps, but somehow louder in the evening quiet. I jerked my head up from the screen, my heart suddenly pounding. Through the window, I could see it was the same man, still in the black hoodie, still standing unnaturally still. This time, I felt a spike of anger along with the fear. What did he want? Why this house? I considered calling the police, but what would I say? That someone had knocked on the door twice? I didn't even know if this was unusual for the neighborhood. I watched him leave again, his movements just as controlled as before. Once he was gone, I double-checked all the locks and tried to return to work. But the cottage felt different now. The creaks and settling noises took on new meaning, and every shadow seemed to hide potential threats. Around midnight, I finally shut down my laptop. The cottage was dark except for my desk lamp, and the silence felt oppressive. As I stood to stretch, a floorboard creaked somewhere upstairs. I froze, trying to convince myself it was just the old house settling, but then I heard it again, a distinct footstep, followed by another. Someone was upstairs, walking slowly and deliberately across the floor above me. I stood paralyzed, my mind racing through possibilities, each worse than the last. How long had they been up there? How had they gotten in? The footsteps continued, moving toward the stairs, and I knew I had only moments to decide what to do. My body reacted before my mind could fully process the situation. I grabbed my phone and car keys from the desk, moving as quietly as possible toward the back door. The footsteps above continued their slow progression toward the stairs, each creak of the floorboards sending fresh waves of terror through me. Just as I reached the back door, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Muddy footprints on the floor that I hadn't seen before. They led from the back door to the stairs, meaning someone had already been in the house while I was working. How long had they been watching me? I tried to open the back door as silently as possible, but the old hinges betrayed me with a low groan. The footsteps above stopped immediately. For a moment, the entire house seemed to hold its breath. Then came the sound of rapid movement. No longer trying to be quiet, whoever was upstairs was now rushing toward the stairs. I yanked the door open and ran. The night air hit me like a wall as I sprinted across the overgrown backyard, my phone clutched in my hand. Behind me, I heard the back door slam open. I didn't look back, just ran harder, heading for the line of trees at the edge of the property. My lungs were burning, and my IT worker's lifestyle was definitely not prepared for this kind of exertion. The trees were dense, their branches grabbing at my clothes as I pushed through them. I could hear pursuit behind me, branches snapping and heavy breathing. In the darkness, I stumbled over an exposed root and went down hard, my phone flying from my hand. I scrambled to find it, my fingers searching desperately through the leaves and dirt. The sound of pursuit was getting closer. I abandoned the search for my phone and pressed myself against a large tree trunk, trying to control my breathing. The footsteps slowed, and I could hear someone moving methodically through the underbrush, searching. "I know you're here," a voice called out, low and controlled. "I've been watching you all day. You should have answered the door when I knocked." It would have been easier. I recognized the voice. It had the same deliberate quality as the knocking. My mind raced through options. I was lost in unfamiliar woods, without a phone, in the middle of the night. The nearest house I knew of was the cottage, and that was no longer safe. The footsteps moved closer, accompanied by the sound of branches being pushed aside. "You're different from the others," The voice continued. They all worked from home too, you know, all alone, focused on their screens, never noticing what was happening around them. But you saw me. You were careful. I like that. A beam of flashlight swept past my hiding spot, and I held my breath. The beam paused, then began to move back toward me. I knew I had seconds before it would reveal my location. Without thinking, I grabbed a rock from the ground beside me and threw it as hard as I could away from my position. The crash of the rock through the branches drew the flashlight beam away. I took my chance and ran in the opposite direction, no longer caring about the noise I made. I could hear cursing behind me, followed by the sound of pursuit resuming. I burst out of the trees onto what appeared to be an old service road. In the dim moonlight, I could see the silhouettes of the abandoned mills looming ahead. Without any better options, I ran toward them. Behind me, I could hear my pursuer gaining ground. The nearest mill was a huge brick structure with broken windows and graffiti-covered walls. A chain-link fence surrounded it, but there was a gap where someone had cut through it. I squeezed through the opening, feeling the rusty wire snag my clothes. Inside, the mill was a maze of old machinery and support columns. Pale moonlight filtered through the broken windows, creating strange shadows that seemed to move and shift. The floor was littered with debris, broken glass, old papers, empty bottles. Every step risked making noise that would give away my position. I moved deeper into the building, trying to stay in the shadows while looking for another exit. The sound of footsteps entering the building echoed off the high ceiling. The acoustics made it impossible to tell exactly where they were coming from. "The mills are like a second home to me," the voice called out, the words bouncing off the walls. I grew up exploring them while everyone else was afraid to come near. I know every corner, every hiding place. "You're only making this more interesting." I crouched behind an old piece of machinery, my heart pounding so hard I was sure it would give me away. The beam of the flashlight swept through the space, creating long shadows that danced across the walls. I could hear him moving methodically through the building, checking each potential hiding spot. As I watched the flashlight beam move away, I noticed something that gave me hope. A metal door on the far wall with an exit sign above it. If I could reach it without being spotted, it might lead to the street or another part of the complex. I began to move slowly toward the door, staying low and using the machinery for cover. Every few steps, I would freeze as the flashlight beam passed nearby or debris crunched under my feet. The exit seemed impossibly far away, but I was making progress. I was about halfway there when my foot caught on something, a piece of metal or wire on the floor. I managed to catch myself before falling, but the noise seemed deafening in the quiet building. The flashlight beam immediately swung in my direction. "There you are," the voice said, closer than I'd realized. You know, usually they try to run home or to their cars. This is much more fun. I abandoned stealth and ran for the exit, hearing rapid footsteps behind me. The door was only yards away now. I reached it and grabbed the handle, praying it wasn't locked. It opened with a screech of rusty hinges, revealing a stairwell leading down. Without hesitation, I plunged into the darkness of the stairwell. The steps were concrete, worn smooth by years of use. I took them as quickly as I dared, using the wall to guide me. Above, I could hear the door opening again, followed by footsteps on the stairs. The beam of the flashlight appeared, sweeping down the stairwell. I pressed myself against the wall at a landing, holding my breath as the light passed over me. The footsteps were getting closer, slow and deliberate again, savoring the chase. The stairwell continued down, and I followed it, hoping it would lead somewhere, anywhere else. The air was getting damper and cooler, suggesting we were heading into some kind of basement level. The thought of being trapped underground with my pursuer sent a new wave of panic through me. Finally, the stairs ended at another door. This one was heavier, made of metal with a push bar across it. I hit the bar hard, and the door opened into what appeared to be an underground tunnel system. The tunnel stretched into darkness in both directions, its curved ceiling covered in pipes and conduits. The air was thick with the smell of damp concrete and rust. I had no idea which way might lead to safety, but the sound of footsteps in the stairwell forced me to choose quickly. I turned left and began to run. The tunnel seemed endless, with occasional side passages branching off into darkness. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, and my footsteps echoed despite my attempts to move quietly. I realized I was in what must be the old mill service tunnels, probably used to channel power and water between buildings during its operational days. Behind me, I could hear my pursuer enter the tunnel system. The flashlight beam appeared again, sweeping along the walls. The tunnels all connect, you know, his voice echoed. They run under the whole complex. Miles of them, and I'm the only one who knows them all. I turned down a side passage, hoping to lose him in the maze. The tunnel grew narrower, the ceiling lower. The pipes above my head were covered in rust and mineral deposits, occasionally dripping cold water onto my face and neck. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, I came to a junction where several tunnels met. Faint light filtered down through a grating in the ceiling, some kind of ventilation or drainage system that opened to the surface. In that dim light, I could see that the walls were covered in graffiti, suggesting that others had found their way down here before. But what caught my attention was a pile of objects in one corner. A backpack, some clothes, personal items that looked like they'd been there for a while. With growing horror, I realized these might belong to previous victims, other people who had been chased through these tunnels. The sound of footsteps echoing through the tunnels spurred me back into motion. I chose another passage and continued moving, trying to keep track of the turns I was making. The tunnel began to slope upward slightly, giving me hope that it might lead to an exit. "You're going the wrong way," the voice called out, closer now. "But that's okay. Take your time. Explore. Like I said, this is more interesting than usual." I came to another junction and paused, trying to get my bearings. The tunnels all looked the same in the darkness. I was completely lost, and my pursuer seemed to be getting closer. The fear that had been driving me began to give way to exhaustion and despair. That's when I saw it. A faint glow ahead that looked different from the occasional light coming through the gratings. It was steady and artificial, possibly indicating an exit, or at least a maintenance area. I moved toward it as quickly as I dared. The light was coming from behind another metal door, this one with small windows set into it. Through the grimy glass, I could see what looked like a maintenance room or utility area. More importantly, I could see stairs leading up on the far side. I tried the door handle, and to my immense relief, it turned. The room was filled with old electrical panels and switches, most of them covered in dust and cobwebs. But there was also a modern security panel on one wall, with a small red light indicating it was active. That's when I remembered something from my earlier research of the area. The old mills were being gradually converted into commercial spaces. Some parts of the complex were already being used for storage and small businesses. This must be one of the converted sections. I had just reached the stairs when I heard the door open behind me. I turned to see the tattooed man stepping into the room, his flashlight beam finding me immediately. "End of the line," he said, his voice no longer echoing but clear and cold. "You've made this very entertaining, but it's time to finish our game." He took a step toward me, and I backed up against the wall. My hand brushed against something mounted there, a fire alarm pull station. Without hesitation, I yanked it down. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Sirens began blaring throughout the building, and strobe lights flashed in the hallway beyond the stairs. The man's face contorted with rage and surprise. "You stupid dash," he began, but was cut off by the sound of heavy doors slamming somewhere above us, fire doors automatically closing. He looked up, then back at me, calculation replacing anger on his face. I didn't wait to see what he would do next. I turned and ran up the stairs, taking them two at a time. Behind me, I could hear him following, but he seemed less certain now. His footsteps hurried rather than deliberate. The stairs led to a hallway with emergency lights flashing along the walls. I could see exit signs pointing the way out. I ran toward them, hearing doors opening somewhere in the building and voices shouting over the alarm. I burst through a fire exit into the cool night air. The side of the building was bathed in the flashing lights of fire trucks that were already arriving, their sirens adding to the chaos. Security guards from the converted section of the mill complex were emerging from other doors, radios crackling. I ran toward the nearest firefighter, gasping out my story between breaths. Within minutes, police were on the scene, and I was sitting in the back of an ambulance, a shock blanket around my shoulders, giving a description of my pursuer. They found him trying to escape through another section of the tunnels. The tattoos made him easily identifiable. He was wanted in connection with several home invasions and assaults in the area. The Airbnb listing, it turned out, was fraudulent, set up using stolen credentials to lure people to the isolated location. In the following days, as I gave statements to police and tried to process what had happened, I learned more about the man who had hunted me through the tunnels. He had grown up in the area when the mills were abandoned, using them as his playground. As an adult, he had turned them into his hunting ground, trading on the area's reputation for urban exploration to find victims. They found evidence of other crimes in the tunnels, personal belongings, phones, items that helped solve several missing persons cases. My decision to run into the mills rather than away from them had unknowingly led to the discovery of his lair. I moved back to my apartment as soon as the power was restored, but sleep didn't come easily for months. Every noise in the night brought back memories of footsteps on creaking floorboards, and the sight of abandoned buildings made my heart race. But gradually, the terror of that night faded into something more like a cautionary tale. I still work remotely, but now I research temporary accommodations much more carefully, and I always trust my instincts when something feels wrong. Sometimes, in my darkest moments, I think about how close I came to becoming just another lost item in those tunnels. But mostly, I think about how strength and survival can come from unexpected places, even from running toward your fears instead of away from them. The old mills still stand on the outskirts of town, their broken windows reflecting the sun by day and swallowing the darkness by night. But their tunnels are sealed now, their secrets known, and their shadows hold no more hunters. Just memories of a night when a simple power outage led to a desperate game of cat and mouse in the labyrinth beneath the city.